Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission here is, well, to take these big stacks of source material, the history, the science, the therapy stuff, and really pull out the essential knowledge, the things that might change how you look at the world.
Exactly.
And today we are doing a really fundamental exploration. We're looking deep into the architecture of self-transformation. We're diving into the core principles of Alcoholics Anonymous and, the wider recovery movement.
That's right. And we're not just doing a quick summary of the 12 steps. It's more like we're performing an autopsy on them, really understanding the structure.
Okay.
Our sources, they cover a lot of ground.
Yeah.
You've got the original Big Book writings, stuff from the co-founders, but also modern brain science insights from people like Gabor Mate.
Right.
And also really crucial psychological perspectives, feminist takes too, like from Stephanie Covington.
So the goal here for you listening is to get past those sort of surface ideas of addiction and really grasp let's say, the universal mechanics of how people make lasting change. We're looking at historical moments, like how did the early movement even get doctors on board? And we're putting that right alongside the hard science, what's actually happening in the brain, the gut chemistry during addiction and recovery.
Yeah, it's about distilling the absolute essence. These ideas, they've been developed over decades, right? Proven effective for millions. And they show these surprisingly consistent truths about what happens when someone shifts away from those compulsive, destructive patterns.
Towards something more balanced.
Towards balance, connection, responsibility. You're going to leave this conversation, hopefully, with a much deeper sense of the blueprint for human resilience. It's fascinating stuff.
Okay, let's get into it then. Section 1, the foundational framework of recovery. All right, so let's unpack this framework. You're saying when you look past the specific substance or behavior, the sources show the whole recovery process kind of hangs on 3 core themes.
That's right.
These themes, Patrick Carnes identified them,
Right.
and they're like guideposts, always there, no matter what step someone's on.
Yes, constant guiding lights. And they are. Balance, focus, and responsibility for self.
Okay. Balance, focus, responsibility.
And think about why. Someone deep in addiction, they often live in this extreme either-or world, right? Either totally clean, perfect, saintly, or completely relapsed and just worthless.
All or nothing.
Exactly. These 3 concepts are designed specifically to take apart that extreme thinking.
So balance is literally about avoiding those extremes, like steering back to the middle, accepting you're not perfect without totally crashing.
Precisely. The addicted mind loves those wild swings. Grandiosity 1 minute, self-pity the next. Balance forces you to accept ambiguity, the gray areas, the middle ground. It's okay not to be perfect.
Okay. And then focus. That sounds like living in the present.
It's the practical side of it, yes. Living right here, right now.
Which brings us to that famous mantra, right? A day at a time.
It's way more than just a catchy phrase. It's really a survival tool.
How so?
Well, think about it. Someone struggling with compulsion is usually, dragged down by shame about the past, or they're completely frozen by fear about the future. How will I cope next week? What if?
Right, the anxiety.
Yeah. So the simple but actually quite radical act of just anchoring yourself in this moment today, it helps stop that chaotic thinking that fuels the urge. Because the craving, it really only lives in regretting the past or fearing the future.
Huh. Okay. And the third one, responsibility for self. That seems to connect back to what you said about grandiosity. It's about knowing your limits.
It is the ultimate antidote, really, to that illusion of being in control of everything. Responsibility for self means recognizing, truly accepting your human limits.
Letting go of trying to control other people or outcomes.
Or even your own intense feelings sometimes. It's letting go of that constant effort. It's that recognition of, okay, I'm not God. My job is just to live within my own skin, my own boundaries.
That recognition, letting go of control.
Yeah.
That leads us right into step 1, doesn't it? The big paradox. Admitting you're powerless over the addiction and life has become unmanageable.
And Chuck C., he frames this really well. He moves it beyond just feeling defeated.
How?
He points out that acceptance, really, truly, honestly, confronting the denial, the self-deception, it isn't surrendering like in a battle. It's actually an empowering act.
Yeah.
Because only after you've honestly faced how deep the problem goes can you actually start moving forward.
Okay, but this is where it gets maybe complicated, especially when we think about this applying to everyone. Stephanie Covington brings up a specific challenge this first step can create, particularly for women.
Yes, and this is a really profound insight. Covington notes that many women, often because of social situations or economic realities, already feel incredibly powerless in big parts of their lives.
Right, they're already fighting for agency.
Exactly. So to then ask them to admit more powerlessness, this time over their addiction, well, it can feel like just another time they're being told to accept a kind of one-down position. It risks digging into existing feelings of helplessness, even trauma.
Yeah, that makes it sound like the step could actually be harmful unless you really get the paradox. If I already feel powerless out there in the world, why would I give up the one thing I feel I can control, even if it's my coping mechanism?
And the paradox is the answer. Covington explains it beautifully. The admission of powerlessness is very specific, very selective. You're only admitting powerlessness over the substance or the behavior itself. That's it.
Ah, okay. Not over your whole life.
Right. And when you finally stop pouring all that energy into trying to control that one thing, you actually free up huge amounts of emotional and mental resources
To do what?
to discover where your real inherent power actually is. In making conscious choices, in setting healthy boundaries, in expressing who you truly are, your self-worth. It's precisely by admitting the ego's defeat in that one specific area that you allow genuine lasting strength to grow everywhere else.
So that shift, moving from denial and trying to control everything to this sort of empowered acceptance, it's basically a mental reframing. Chuck C called it putting on a new pair of glasses.
Exactly. You need that profound shift in perspective just to even see that hope is possible,
Yeah.
or serenity, or purpose. The old ways of thinking, they have to be broken. And this lines up perfectly with, much older wisdom, too. If you look at texts like, "As a man thinketh," there's this idea that the mind is like a delicate and plastic instrument. It responds readily to our thought habits.
So if the habit is denial and craving,
Yeah.
then your life reflects that. Your reality is shaped by it.
So recovery isn't just stopping the behavior. It's fundamentally about changing the mind's whole operating system, learning to live from the inside out, as Covington puts it. That is absolutely the goal. When you start cultivating that inner knowing, that sense of self-worth, you stop just reacting constantly to what's happening outside you. You stop desperately needing validation from substances or from other people.
You build an internal reality.
Yes, where your true self, not the addicted self, can actually live. You stop defining yourself by the addiction, by the trauma, and start identifying with your inherent value, your core self.
That's a powerful idea. And a good place to transition. Because if this transformation is so internal, how do we explain the fact that often the problem seems to start outside the person, deep in the family system? Our sources are really clear that addiction is systemic, right? It's rarely just one person's isolated failure.
Oh, the systemic link is, it's inescapable. Carnes' research is pretty stark on this. Most people struggling with addiction, or co-addiction for that matter, they come from families where addiction or some kind of compulsive behavior was already present, often going back generations.
You have to look back quite far.
He suggests tracing it back 3 generations to really get the full picture, to understand where the shame might originate, how these dysfunctional coping patterns get passed down.
And the definition of what counts as an addictive characteristic is really broad here. It's not just alcohol or drugs.
Not at all. The list Carnes uses is comprehensive.
Yeah.
You're looking for things like, yes, alcoholism, but also compulsive gambling, eating disorders, anorexia, bulimia, sex addiction, being a victim or even a perpetrator of child abuse,
Wow.
serious mental health issues, co-addiction itself, or even behaviors that look different on the surface but serve the same function, like extreme religiosity, workaholism, compulsive spending.
It's kind of stunning how many forms that need to escape or numb out can take.
They're all, at their core, different attempts to manage painful feelings through something external, something compulsive.
And this illness, it really does impact the entire family unit, doesn't it? Sometimes partners, children, they end up showing symptoms almost as much as the person with the primary addiction.
The big book itself, and this is quite radical for its time, stated it very frankly. It said, years of living with an alcoholic is almost sure to make any wife or child neurotic. The entire family is, to some extent, ill.
That's a critical point. It reframes it completely, not just a moral failing in one person.
Right. It's more like a contagion that affects the whole system. That means the whole system needs attention, or at least acknowledgement, even if only one person initially seeks recovery.
And that level of illness, that chaos in the system, it fuels that need for control in the individual we talked about. Which brings us back to that core AA belief. Selfishness and self-centeredness are the root of the trouble. it's like the spiritual side of the systemic problem.
Yeah, if you grow up in that kind of chaotic environment, you naturally develop coping mechanisms. Like Carnes points out, denying your own feelings, your wants, your needs, just shutting down.
Hmm.
And that denial then blooms into that extreme self-centeredness of active addiction, where the person tries desperately to control their inner world, control everything around them, because they feel like they're at the center of every problem, and therefore must be the center of every solution.
And the spiritual answer is letting go.
Simply letting go of that crushing need for control.
Okay, now let's connect that psychological denial to the actual brain chemistry. Thanks to people like Gabor Mate, we have a clearer picture now. How does the brain's own wiring reinforce the cycle?
Well, it really starts with dopamine, the pleasure and reward neurotransmitter. When a substance, or even certain behaviors, gives you that artificially high dopamine hit,
The brain reacts.
yeah, the brain basically tries to restore balance. It tries to turn down the volume on that intense signal because it reads it as an overload.
How does it do that?
It aggressively reduces the number of available dopamine receptors, just shuts them down.
So the brain is literally trying to protect itself from the overwhelming pleasure signal.
Precisely. And that reduction in receptors, that is tolerance. You need more and more of the substance just to feel okay, let alone get that initial high. But here's the real crisis point, especially in early sobriety. When you take the substance away, the brain now has far fewer receptors left to process normal, everyday dopamine signals.
So the brain can't generate normal pleasure or motivation anymore. It's running on empty.
Exactly. It leads to those severe withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Deep depression, anhedonia, that inability to feel any pleasure, crushing fatigue, intense irritability. It's a neurochemical reality.
And that takes time to heal.
It takes weeks, sometimes months, for the brain to slowly, gradually increase those receptor numbers back towards normal. But if someone doesn't understand, that's what's happening.
They just think sobriety feels awful permanently.
Yes, they assume this is it. This misery is sobriety. And that, of course, fuels the massive temptation to go back to the substance just to feel normal again.
And looking specifically at alcohol, it triggers its own physical cycle too, right? Beyond the dopamine. Something about exhaustion and craving.
Yeah, sources like Quit, like a woman, really dig into this. Alcohol gets converted into sugar very quickly in the body.
So you get a quick energy boost. Or maybe it helps with anxiety, low blood sugar feelings.
Initially, yes. It can feel like it solves a problem, like a stress headache or that jittery feeling. But that sugar flood makes the body overproduce insulin,
Leading to a crash later.
leading to reactive hypoglycemia, low blood sugar down the line. And that crash puts huge stress on the adrenal glands, causing physical exhaustion, even mitochondrial fatigue.
So it creates this physical dependency loop separate from the high itself.
Absolutely. When you crash, what do you crave? More stimulants, more sugar, more coffee, or more alcohol to deal with the exhaustion it caused.
Vicious cycle.
And there's more. Alcohol absolutely wrecks your gut microbiome. And since something like 90% of your body's serotonin, the key mood regulator, right, is actually produced in the gut.
Drinking actively undermines your ability to feel okay emotionally.
Exactly. It sabotages your body's natural mood stabilizers.
So let me get this straight. Alcohol hijacks the brain's reward system, drains your physical energy system, and destroys your natural mood regulators.
It really is a perfect storm, a self-perpetuating cycle of physical and psychological despair.
It really underscores why that AA definition of addiction as an illness, body, mind, and spirit is so spot on.
It is. The physical effects of the drug directly feed the psychological misery, which then drives the urge to use again. It's all interconnected.
Okay, section 3. The process of transformation, navigating the steps. So admitting powerlessness, step 1, that's the end of denial, the start of the real work. And the process immediately shifts, doesn't it? From isolation towards connection, finding guides, finding some kind of spiritual connection in steps 2 and 3.
Yes, this is a critical turning point. The person has to move past that ingrained idea of, I have to handle this all by myself, because that obsession is actually part of the addiction.
So you have to reach out.
You have to consult others. Trusted guides are absolutely essential. They help ease that initial pain. They model what long-term recovery actually looks like. And they offer concrete ways to connect with something bigger than your own struggling self.
And who are these guides typically? It sounds like it's not just one person.
Ideally, no. It's about building a network of support, of wisdom.
Yeah.
So yes, the sponsor is key, obviously. But it also might include A therapist, maybe clergy if that fits, mentors, other people in recovery who have been through it and can share their experience.
People who teach from their own experience.
Exactly. They show the newcomer, look, here's how you acknowledge the wound, here's how you feel the pain without running back to the old ways, and crucially, here's how you allow yourself to receive help. That's huge.
Now, the higher power concept in steps 2 and 3, that's often a big sticking point for people, isn't it?
It certainly can be.
But our sources suggest the founders were actually pretty flexible about defining this power.
They were incredibly flexible, actually. Covington makes this point very clearly. The founders knew, from their own experience with the Oxford group, how rigid religious dogma could push people away. So they specifically encourage each person to develop their own understanding, their own individual interpretation of this power.
The goal wasn't religious conversion.
Absolutely not. And for many women especially, that flexibility was vital.
Why particularly women?
Well, it allowed them to steer clear of, say, traditional religious models that might feel overly masculine or paternalistic or based on reward and punishment, especially if those kinds of models echoed earlier negative experiences or feelings of judgment.
So the requirement is just openness.
It's simply opening yourself to the possibility of a power greater than your own individual limited self. That power can be the recovery group itself, the universe, nature, a traditional God. The label truly doesn't matter. The experience of connection does.
And for a lot of people, that experience isn't slow or gradual. It can be sudden, overwhelming.
Yes, the book Came to Believe has some powerful accounts of this. There's one story of someone lying in bed, feeling too ashamed, too proud to ask for help, and just crying out in utter desperation, "Please, God, don't let me die like this."
And something happened.
Instantly. An immediate feeling of a presence. And the description is key. The numbness disappeared, and that profound, crushing sense of being utterly alone just vanished.
Wow.
That immediate experience of connection, that's often the first real spiritual awakening. It's the proof right there that they weren't isolated, weren't doomed.
So the steps themselves, they act like a map then, moving you from that internal conflict towards reality and faith.
Yeah, Carn's step progression chart lays it out clearly. Step 1. You move from the delusion you can control the substance to reality. Step 2. You move from self-grandiosity and obsession to accepting limitations and humility. Step 3. You move from trying to control everything to faith and trusting the process.
It charts the path from self-centeredness to connection.
Precisely.
Okay, let's shift to the action steps. Inventory and amends, steps 4, 5, 8, and 9. Step 4 is the big inventory, writing it all down. But why is step 5 telling another person the exact nature of your wrongs? Why is that so necessary?
Step 5. Often called the bedrock of future sobriety. Why? Because, as Dixon explains, its main job is to deflate the ego.
How does talking about it do that?
When you actually say your faults out loud, not just think about them, but verbalize them to God, to yourself, and to another trusted human being, like your sponsor, you shatter that wall of isolation and secrecy that the addiction thrives behind.
So it's the act of speaking the hidden shame that breaks its power over you.
That's exactly it. For many, the fear of being truly known is actually greater than the fear of dying from the addiction. And this inventory, step 4, it needs real honesty.
It's not just surface stuff.
No. As Bill sees it, warns about this. Sometimes someone's outward behavior might look okay, but digging deeper reveals defects buried under thick layers of self-justification. It's those hidden things, the resentments, the fears you haven't faced, that kept ambushing the person, pushing them back to the substance.
Got it. So once that inventory is done, the focus shifts outward with step 8, making a list of people you've harmed. And then step 9, making amends. How do you even start step 8? That sounds daunting.
Daily reflection suggests focusing on becoming willing to do whatever it takes to make things right. The initial goal is clearing your own side of the street, clearing your mind of guilt and fear. You need to recognize that even small hurts you cause need to be acknowledged, put on the list. The willingness is the first key.
And then step 9, actually going and making the amends, there's a really important warning attached to that one, isn't there? It connects back to that responsibility theme.
It does, critically. The whole point of step 9 is restitution for other people. Mate emphasizes this. It is not about making yourself feel better or look good. And the crucial rule is, make direct amends wherever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others.
Except when making the amend would cause more harm.
Exactly. This requires real care, real discretion, usually discussed thoroughly with a sponsor. If confessing something from the past, say an old infidelity the other person never knew about, or a minor theft that's long forgotten if revealing it now would cause serious, unnecessary emotional damage to the person you harmed, or maybe even worse, injure an innocent third party, like a child involved.
Then you don't do it.
Then the program advises you not to make that specific amend directly. You find other ways to make restitution, perhaps indirectly, without causing fresh injury.
That distinction is huge. It really shifts the focus away from just clearing your own conscience and puts the well-being of others first, prevents further harm.
Responsibility.
Okay, Section 4. Forging the fellowship history and unity.
Right, because the power of this whole thing really lies in the fellowship, doesn't it? One person helping another. To get that, we need to look at some key moments in the early history, starting with how they got the medical community involved.
And you have to start with Bill Wilson and Dr. Silkworth at Towns Hospital. Silkworth, the little doctor who loved drunks. What was his big contribution? What set the stage?
Silkworth gave Bill W. the medical framework he desperately needed. He offered that famous opinion. Alcoholism involves an allergy of the body plus an obsession of the mind.
Why was that so important?
Because it took away the wiggle room, the ability to minimize or deny. By defining it medically, not as a moral failing, he removed a huge layer of stigma, and it offered the first real hope that maybe this was treatable, not just a lack of willpower.
Okay. Meanwhile, over in Akron, Dr. Bob found his key partner, but in a religious hospital. And the story's pretty colorful.
Oh, yes. His crucial ally was Sister Ignatia at St. Thomas Hospital. And the anecdote, it really shows the sheer resourcefulness they had back then. The hospital rules forbid admitting alcoholics.
So what did they do?
Dr. Bob and Sister Ignatia literally had to, quote, bootleg a detoxing alcoholic into a tiny unused room. And when the poor guy complained about having no privacy,
She kicked him out.
no. Sister Ignatia moved him into the hospital's flower room. Can you imagine? But this partnership worked so well that others followed. Sister Victorine and Father Nagel set up a dedicated ward at Charity Hospital in Cleveland just a bit later, around 1940.
It sounds like Cleveland really became the sort of the testing ground for scaling this up.
It absolutely was the proving ground. After the big book came out and the message started spreading, Cleveland just exploded. Winter of 1939, the membership there jumped to hundreds in just months.
Wow.
This massive growth proved, as they said, that mass production of sobriety was a glad fact. It validated the whole approach to the book, the personal sponsorship model. It showed it could work on a larger scale.
Okay, but now we need to talk about a critical split. AA started inside the Oxford group, this religious movement, but it had to break away to survive, right? What caused the split?
Yeah, the early members were mostly ex-Oxford group people.
Yeah.
But the group's practices, which were quite specific and rigid, started causing friction as AA grew and attracted different kinds of people.
What kind of friction?
Several things. Too much required silence in meetings, hard for restless newcomers. Practices that felt like public confession, which was a big problem for the growing number of Catholic members joining. Even things like using a specific Bible translation rubbed some the wrong way. It was this non-denominational spiritual idea clashing with very specific religious rules.
So to be truly universal, truly welcoming to anyone, they had to separate and create their own framework.
Exactly. A guy named Clarence S., a key figure in Cleveland, really pushed for an independent identity. And in November 1939, the first group that was officially just AA, the Borton Group in Cleveland, was formed. That marked the formal break from the Oxford group's religious ties and structures.
And that allowed AA to focus purely on recovery from alcoholism.
It's primary purpose.
And to protect that purpose and unity, they developed the traditions. These principles designed to shield the fellowship from, well, itself mostly, corruption, distraction, two seem absolutely core. Anonymity and non-professionalism.
Yes, anonymity, interestingly, started basically out of fear.
Fear of what?
Public opinion. Early groups were like secret societies because members were terrified of the distrust and contempt out there. If a member relapsed publicly, it could discredit the whole fragile movement.
But it became something more.
Over time, as Dixon notes, that fear evolved into a kind of spiritual principle, a sacrifice, ensuring no single person's ego or fame could eclipse the message itself.
And as Bill sees, it is pretty blunt about anonymity not being optional.
It's absolute. The text states that 100% personal anonymity before the public is just as vital for the fellowship's survival as 100% sobriety is for the individual member. Keep the focus on principles, not personalities.
Okay. And non-professionalism, that tackles the money issue, right? Goes back to that early question from Albert Scott in 1937. Won't money spoil this thing?
Scott really hit the nail on the head. The fear was simple. Whoever holds the purse strings calls the shots.
Right.
The founders were deeply worried that if AA started taking outside money, big donations, the foundation running things might get wealthy and then be tempted to, drift away from the core mission. And just as importantly, if the members themselves didn't have to pay for their own groups,
They wouldn't feel responsible.
they'd shrug and say, oh, the main office has plenty of money, why should I chip in? It fosters dependency, not responsibility.
So the tradition keeps the financial health and the service work squarely on the members themselves.
Exactly. The traditions are firm. 12-step work, carrying the message to another suffering alcoholic, is never paid for. Ever. Now, certain jobs needed to run the organization, service roles, those can be salaried positions. But the core spiritual work is volunteer.
And AA shouldn't get involved in other businesses or causes.
It has to stick to straight AA to maintain its focus and its unity. No distractions.
Okay, Section 5. Implications beyond alcohol and the way forward. Let's zoom out again. Look at the bigger picture, especially with newer insights, like from Maya Solovitz, framing addiction more as a learning or developmental issue.
Yeah, this perspective is, it's quite a radical shift and a much more humane one, I think, away from the old moral judgments. The data is pretty striking. Something like 90% of all substance addictions actually start during adolescence.
90%.
Yes. And here's the other remarkable finding. Most of those addictions that start in the teens naturally stop by age 30.
Without formal treatment, necessarily.
Often, yes, which makes addiction look much less like a fixed, lifelong disease for everyone, and more like, for many people, a developmental phase. A pattern of learned, maladaptive coping that often resolves as the brain fully matures.
That idea you mentioned earlier, the addiction as an attempted solution, not the root problem that completely changes how we should approach treatment, doesn't it?
It flips the script entirely. Instead of punishing the symptom, the drug use, you focus on healing the underlying wound that made the symptom necessary in the first place.
And that wound, overwhelmingly, is trauma.
The connection is incredibly strong. Childhood trauma dramatically increases addiction risk. Some research attributes nearly 2/3 up to 64% of the risk for illicit drug use directly to childhood adversity.
How does trauma lead to addiction?
Trauma basically wires a young developing brain to expect danger, to live in a threatening, chaotic world. That necessitates finding immediate, often impulsive ways to find relief or escape from overwhelming feelings.
And our sources are crystal clear that the old ways, punishment, harsh confrontation, locking people up, they actually make things worse.
They're actively counterproductive because they just reinforce the original trauma. They deepen those feelings of powerlessness, helplessness, being trapped, which likely drove the addiction to begin with.
So confrontation increases relapse.
Absolutely. Increases relapse risk, increases PTSD. Decades of research confirm it. Kinder, more humane approaches that understand the neurobiology and the developmental aspects are always superior to judgment and punishment.
Okay, so if recovery is about replacing that flawed coping mechanism with something constructive, it loops us right back to those core themes: balance, focus, especially the power of living in the present.
Yes, recovery really boils down to choosing, again and again, to live now. The Al-Anon book, Courage to Change, talks about letting go of the paralyzing what-ifs and the should-haves that keep pulling you out of today.
And the tools help with that.
Prayer, meditation, even just repeating those simple slogans, they're all techniques designed to anchor the mind right here, right now, make you receptive to guidance, find a little bit of calm in the storm.
And then the final essential piece for staying well, service, the 12th step itself, carrying the message. Why is doing service work so critical, even for someone who feels recovered?
It's pretty much non-negotiable for long-term maintenance. Daily reflections puts it well. Service, especially regular contact with newcomers, gives perspective.
How so?
Without it, it's easy for someone in recovery to get swallowed up by the normal dramas and annoyances of everyday life. They can lose sight of how far they've actually come, how deep the illness really was.
Seeing the newcomers reminds them.
It's that constant reminder, that joy of seeing newcomers grow, that keeps their own recovery fresh. It recharges their spiritual battery, you could say. It transforms sobriety from just not using into a life with actual purpose.
Yeah.
And fundamentally, what really helps people get well and stay well, it's sharing the freedom and the joy and the happiness of life now, as the Courage to Change puts it.
Not just dwelling on the past.
Right. Constantly rehashing the horror stories or the war stories, it can eventually wear down hope. Service keeps the focus on the positive reality, on what's been gained through connection, and finding that self-acceptance.
This whole deep dive from looking at family history to dopamine receptors to the founding of the fellowship, it really feels like it reveals this universal human blueprint, this need for connection, for self-acceptance. It's all baked into this recovery framework.
Hmm.
It demands that balance, that focus, and that kind of radical responsibility for oneself.
It really does. And the key knowledge nuggets we've pulled out, the power hidden in admitting powerlessness,
Hmm.
the actual brain science behind craving and why withdrawal is so hard, the way that
Yeah.
traditions like anonymity protect the whole thing, they all point towards one sustainable way to live from the inside out.
So let's leave you, the listener, with a final thought to chew on. If the sources are right, if that struggle to just be present, to find real connection is what pushes people towards artificial stimulants, as one source called them,
Hmm.
then just think about the colossal amount of human energy that currently gets poured into anxiety, into denial, into hiding, into shame, all across our society.
It's immense.
So what if? What if we, as individuals, and maybe even as a whole society, could take all that wasted energy, the energy tied up in that internal conflict, and redirect it
Channel it
towards being consciously present, towards actually engaging with the real problems the world is facing right now? If we channeled that energy outwards, constructively, what kind of future could we build?
a more balanced, more connected, more sustainable one, perhaps. It's certainly something to think about.
A truly limitless one, maybe. Keep seeking knowledge. Keep applying these principles: balance, focus, responsibility in your own life.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.